Hi, guys. Before we get to today's episode, I'd like to encourage you, if you are an entrepreneur or startup founder who would like to network with like-minded entrepreneurs and startups to be able to share best practices, tips, and all kinds of information along the way, I'd love to see you join our community. You can head on over to southernstartups.com/Slack to join. We look forward to seeing you there. Thanks so much. All right, guys, let's talk about startup names. Hi, everybody. Jonathan Patrick with you again on a Sunday. Just finished up a ton of yard work. Do you like yard work? Because I am not a fan of it. I've been patching drywall in the house today and yesterday. I've been putting mulch down, and I got to tell you, there's a lot of other things I'd rather be doing. But anyways, that's a little bit of a sidebar. Today, I want to talk to you about startup names or even just names of a business in general, because it's one of those things that people get all bent out of shape about trying to come up with the perfect name. I've done it myself. I've seen entrepreneurs do it. They will sit and spend months trying to develop the perfect startup name, and they never seem to be happy with it. And at some point, you just have to move on. Now, I have some examples of businesses that created the name, their startup name, that probably should not have just moved on. I want to share some of those with you, and then I'll go on a little bit more about naming your business and naming your startup. The first one I want to share with you, and some of these go all the way back to 2014, but this one was 5C. Does that make any sense to you what that business does? It probably doesn't. And actually, their URL was OOOOOC.com. Right? Makes no sense whatsoever. It was actually a social marketplace that launched, and you don't know about it because they didn't make it very long. The next one I want to share with you is Prophylactic, spelled PROFILACTIC. It's not the health product that you think of. It was a news aggregator site. Again, a name that has absolutely nothing to do with the business model whatsoever. So therefore, it just didn't make a whole lot of sense. What about cool? You know what cool is? We all want to be cool. We all want to be happening people, right? This was actually spelled CUIL. And that's one of the things I want to stop and talk about is this idea of taking a word, misspelling it, so that you can get the same URL that's associated with your business. Now, look, it's very important from an SEO perspective, a search engine optimization perspective, that you have a keyword in your URL. I'm not going to talk about that too much today, but just know that that's very important from an SEO standpoint. And so I get why some people want to play around because maybe xyz.com is already taken, cool.com is already taken, so these guys went with CUIL. Again, just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's hard for me to see the name of that business and know what it's about. No, cool, CUIL, is not about being cool and being a happening person. It was about search engines and things like that. Here's another one, a little bit more well-known if you're in the WordPress or website space, Joomla. Do you know what Joomla is? Well, it's actually a CMS system, and they have customers like Harvard University and all kinds of others. Can you spell Joomla if you had to guess? Give it a shot in your head, right? Joomla. Some of you may know that. If you do, that's super cool. Put a comment below in the video. I'd love to see why you knew about it. But Joomla, but the name itself, again, doesn't tell you what the business does. And that's one of the things I want to talk about. From a branding perspective, it definitely makes sense. The name that you choose for your business tells people at least a little bit about your business model. So an example will be my very first startup. The three partners got together. We spent a few hours bouncing ideas off of each other, but we didn't want to get stagnated in picking a name. So we ran with one, and that was, the idea was a business-to-business networking site that connected like-minded professionals that had never met before over coffee or lunch so that they could grow their business. And you can tell I've said that a few times, right? So go grab lunch. And we chose that because, you know, I meet you at a chamber event or at a BNI event or some sort of in-person networking event or even online through LinkedIn. And if we're in the same area, sooner or later, that leads to, hey, why don't we go grab lunch sometime? And that's why we chose it. And it gives you at least a little taste of what the business does. That's really important. But you can't always get the name that you want, especially when you're trying to match that to a URL, or maybe it's already taken or something like that. And that's why you see a lot of these startups kind of changing their name and using all these funky variations of a name. I just don't think it's a good practice. I think you'd be better served to take the time to sit down and map out other words that make sense along those lines, maybe even acronyms or something like that, to get a match from the brand of what your business delivers and then what the name is. And I get it. It's one of those things when people name a business, they just it's sort of, you want it to feel sexy, you want it to feel cool, you want to use that name and see it on a logo and go, that's my business. I get it. I've been there and I've done that. Don't get so fancy with it. Don't go crazy. I mean, let's look at some others. Here's one, Gravy. That's an example of one that actually just took the word and spelled it differently. Not Gravy, the yummy stuff that goes on biscuits, which I absolutely love for breakfast. This was Gravee, and it was a health search engine, right? Never heard of it. Never heard of it before. You probably haven't either. So getting too fancy with your business name, don't get bogged down for months on end trying to come up with the perfect name. It's not a lot of fun to rebrand down the road, but maybe you can find combinations of names. So one of the things that I do suggest, especially when you're trying to match your business name to a URL, is go with a combination of 3 words, right? So in most places or most websites these days, a lot of the good combinations of 2 words are taken. I don't have an example off the top of my head, but businessnetworking.com is probably taken, right? But if you said gobusinessnetworking.com, the business name might just be business networking, but you added a go to it on the front end for your URL. You still have business networking in your website address. You can still use that in your SEO and your keywords. You just add a letter on a word on the front end. It's one of the ways you can do it. But what I'm really trying to get at, probably not doing such a good job, is to tell you, don't get so bogged down in the picking of a name for your business or your startup. It doesn't have to be perfect out of the gate. You can always pivot at a later date. But I do believe it makes sense to strive really hard such that at least the name imparts some portion of what your business or startup does. Maybe it's the industry you're in. And a great way to do all of this is use a combination of 3 different words along the way. Makes it easier for your URL, and then you can alter it a little bit here or there. Hope that information helps you. Next week, we'll have an interview with Charles Davis of Tailgate House. I hope you join me then so he can tell you about how he brings the party to you. See you later.